The sun was dipping below the skyline, casting long shadows across the pristine neighborhood. The driveway gleamed like polished stone, the kind that screamed money and exclusivity. A tall iron gate framed the entrance, guarded by a man in a crisp uniform with a badge that carried a touch of authority. He was new to the job, eager to prove himself, and tonight he was ready to enforce every rule in the book. The sound of tires crunching against gravel made him stiffen. A sleek car rolled into the private driveway, its tinted windows catching the fading sunlight. The guard's jaw tightened. He had clear instructions. No unauthorized vehicles. No exceptions. The car came to a smooth stop just a few feet ahead. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped a woman in her late 30s. She was elegant but understated, dressed in a tailored jacket, her presence both calm and commanding. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder, preparing to head toward the grand house at the end of the drive. "Excuse me, ma'am," the guard barked, striding forward with heavy steps. "This is private property. You can't park here." The woman turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "I know where I am," she said softly, her tone calm but laced with quiet confidence. The guard folded his arms, puffing out his chest. "Then you should also know. You don't belong here. This driveway is off limits. I cannot allow. Please leave immediately." Neighbors peeked out from their windows, curious at the sudden confrontation. The woman stood her ground. For a moment, the air thickened with tension. "Sir," she replied, her voice steady, "I have every right to be here." But the guard would not budge. He was convinced she was lying. Another entitled outsider trying to sneak into a wealthy enclave. He raised his voice, insisting she'll back her car out right now. The woman did not flinch. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out a small set of keys, and pressed the button. The gates behind him swung open smoothly, the security system recognizing her signal. The guard froze. His confidence cracked as realization began to dawn. The neighbors gasped. She was not a trespasser at all. She took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. "You see," she said quietly, "this isn't just a driveway. This is my driveway, and that house you've been protecting all evening. It belongs to me." His face drained of color, his earlier bravado collapsing into embarrassment. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the mechanical hum of the gate still moving behind him. In that single moment, the guard's perception shattered. He had judged her by appearance, by assumption, and in doing so, he had underestimated the woman who stood before him. What followed would not only humble him, but also uncover the story of a woman who had fought her way through prejudice, hardship, and countless obstacles to claim what was rightfully hers. She was more than a homeowner. She was a testament to resilience, determination, and the quiet power of those who are too often overlooked. And tonight, with one simple revelation, she would change more than just his mind. She would change his life. The evening sky was painted in shades of amber and crimson, a fading sun casting its glow across the exclusive neighborhood. The air was still, quiet, and heavy, with the kind of silence that only wealth could buy. Each mansion sat proudly behind manicured hedges and wrought iron gates, guarded by cameras and private patrols. Security here was not just a formality, it was a statement of status. On this particular evening, a new security guard named Daniel stood at his post near the entrance of one of the grandest estates on the street. His crisp uniform was freshly pressed, his posture rigid, and his eyes sharp with determination. This was his chance to prove himself his first week on the job, and he wanted no mistakes. He had heard rumors of trespassers, delivery drivers trying to slip past, and even reporters eager for a glimpse of the mansion's mysterious owner. Daniel was not going to let anything slip under his watch. Just as the street lamps flickered to life, he heard the distinct hum of an engine approaching. A sleek black sedan rolled down the quiet street, its tinted windows reflecting the glow of the setting sun. Daniel's pulse quickened. He adjusted his cap, squared his shoulders, and prepared himself. The car turned deliberately into the long, pristine driveway. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He had not been informed of any guests or scheduled deliveries tonight. Immediately, alarm bells rang in his head. To him, this was a blatant trespass and intrusion into the sanctity of the property he had sworn to guard. The sedan came to a slow stop halfway up the driveway. For a moment, Daniel considered calling his supervisor, but then the driver's side door opened and out stepped a woman. She looked to be in her late 30s, dressed in a tailored jacket and simple trousers, carrying a leather handbag slung neatly across her shoulder. Her stride was steady, her movements precise, as though she belonged exactly where she was. But though Daniel's eyes, trained by assumption rather than fact, she was out of place. Her car was not one of the flashy luxury brands that usually graced this driveway, and her quiet, unassuming elegance did not fit the image he had built in his head of the estate's wealthy owner. Daniel's straining and his pride kicked in. He strode quickly across the driveway, his heavy boots echoing against the polished stone. "Excuse me, ma. Cut it out." His tone firm, authoritative, almost accusatory. The woman stopped mid-step and turned to face him. Her eyes were calm, but they held a quiet strength that seemed to unsettle him. "Yes?" she asked, her voice measured, unshaken by his sudden approach. Daniel planted his feet firmly and folded his arms across his chest. "This is private property," he declared. "You can't park here. I'll have to ask you to leave immediately." For a brief moment, silence hung between them. The woman studied him carefully, her expression unreadable. Then, with a soft but steady voice, she said, "I know exactly where I am." Her answer only fueled his suspicion. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then you should also know you don't belong. This driveway is restricted. No one comes in without authorization." By now, the commotion had begun to attract attention. Curtains in nearby windows shifted as curious neighbors peeked out. A jogger passing by slowed her pace, pretending to adjust her headphones while stealing glances at the scene. The neighborhood thrived on order, and any disruption, even a small one, became the evening's entertainment. The woman, however, remained composed. She did not argue, nor did she raise her voice. Instead, she adjusted her bag, straightened her jacket, and said simply, "Sir, I have every right to be here." Daniel shook his head, mistaking her calm confidence for arrogance. His voice grew louder, edged with the certainty of someone who believed he was in control. "Listen, I don't want to call for backup. But if you don't get back in your car and leave this property, I will have no choice." Gasps whispered among the onlookers. The tension was thick now, hanging over the driveway like a storm waiting to break. The woman did not flinch. Instead, she took a deliberate step closer to him, her eyes locking onto his with unyielding steadiness. The standoff had begun. One man fueled by pride and assumption, one woman rooted in truth and quiet power. Neither was willing to back down, and though Daniel did not know it yet, in the next few seconds his world and his perception was about to shatter. The air grew colder as the confrontation stretched on. The once serene driveway had become a stage for an unfolding drama, and Daniel, the security guard, was determined to be the lead actor. He squared his shoulders, his eyes hardening with authority he was eager to wield. The woman, still poised and calm, had not raised her voice once. Her presence seemed to carry a quiet weight, as though she had nothing to prove. "Yetto Daniel." That composure looked like defiance. And defiance, on this driveway, was unacceptable. "Ma'am, I'm not going to repeat myself again," Daniel said, his tone now sharper, his voice carrying across the otherwise quiet neighborhood. "You need to get back into your vehicle and leave immediately. This is private property, and you do not belong here." The words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. The woman tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving his. Her silence unsettled him more than any argument could have. She finally responded, her tone low but firm. "And what makes you so certain I do not belong here?" Daniel blinked, caught off guard by the question. His answer came swiftly, unfiltered. "Because I know who lives here. I know the type of people who own places like this." He gestured toward the mansion at the end of the driveway, its grand silhouette glowing under the soft light of dusk. "And with all due respect, ma'am, you don't fit that picture." A hush seemed to fall over the street. Neighbors who had gathered behind half-open curtains and cracked windows now leaned forward, captivated. His words, careless, assumptive, echoed louder than he intended. The woman's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, though it held no warmth. It was the kind of smile that spoke volumes without uttering a word, a smile that told Daniel he had crossed an invisible line. "Is that so?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he pressed on, convinced he was right. "Look, I'm only doing my job. People try to slip in all the time. Delivery drivers, pretending to be guests, reporters trying to get inside, even strangers thinking they can just park here. My orders are to keep them out. And I can tell, Mamu, don't live here." The woman took a step forward, and for the first time, Daniel noticed something in her eyes, a flicker of steel, an intensity that unsettled his confidence. She did not argue. She did not plead. Instead, she reached into her bag with slow, deliberate motion. Daniel's hand instinctively brushed the walkie-talkie. At his belt, he was ready to call for backup. Sure, she was about to produce some flimsy excuse or a fabricated pass. Instead, she pulled out a small key fob, sleek, elegant, and unmistakably custom. Without breaking eye contact, She pressed a button. A deep metallic groan filled the air as the massive wrought iron gates behind him came alive, swinging open with smooth precision. The security system blinked green, sensors aligning, welcoming her home with silent recognition. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. A child's voice whispered from a nearby porch. She opened the gates. Daniel's face drained of color. His confident stance faltered as the realization began to claw at his certainty. This was not a trespasser. This was not a guest. Whoever this woman was, she had direct access to the property. But still, his pride resisted. He straightened, fumbling for authority that was slipping like sand through his fingers. "That doesn't mean anything," he stammered. "Just because you have a remote doesn't prove the woman cut him off." Her voice now sharp enough to silence the murmuring crowd. "I warned you. I told you I had every right to be here. But you didn't listen. You judged me before you knew me." Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them, her heels clicking softly against the stone. The fading light caught her face, illuminating the quiet power etched in her expression. "The truth is simple," she continued, her tone calm but commanding. "This isn't just a driveway I am standing on. This is my driveway. That mansion at the end. It is mine. And the property you have been so eager to protect belongs to me." The words landed like thunder. The neighbors gasped louder, whispers spreading like wildfire across the block. Faces disappeared from windows, embarrassed to have witnessed a man's pride crumble under the weight of truth. Daniel stood frozen, the last remnants of his authority evaporating. His mind scrambled, searching for an excuse, a defense, anything to recover. But there was nothing left, only silence, shame, and the heavy gaze of the woman he had tried so hard to dismiss. And beneath that silence, an unspoken truth lingered. He had not just challenged her right to be there, he had revealed his assumptions, his prejudice, and his failure to see beyond appearances. The rising tension had broken, not in his favor, but in hers. The silence that followed her declaration was deafening. The distant hum of crickets rose into the still night air, and the faint rustle of leaves seemed louder than the pounding in Daniel's chest. His authority, so solid, so assured, just minutes earlier crumbled under the weight of her words. "This is my driveway. That mansion is mine." The sentence echoed in his head, refusing to let him breathe. He stared at her, searching for any crack in her confidence, any flicker of deceit that might prove her wrong. But there was none. Her eyes, unwavering and sharp, bore into him with a truth that did not require further proof. Daniel's throat tightened. His hands, once folded confidently across his chest, now dangled awkwardly at his sides. For the first time since he had begun this job, felt small. Smaller than the woman who stood before him. Smaller even than the neighbors watching from their well-lit porches. One of the neighbors, a woman in a silk robe, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She owns it. That's her house." Another man across the street pulled out his phone, recording what was quickly becoming the most talked about moment in the neighborhood. Daniel flushed with embarrassment. He was no longer just confronting a stranger, he was a spectacle. His words, now a public mistake that would linger long after this night was over. The woman took another step forward, and though her movements were graceful, they carried a commanding force that pressed against Daniel like a weight. She reached into her handbag once more. Daniel braced himself instinctively, as though preparing for another blow to his pride. This time, she drew out a small leather wallet. With practiced precision, she flipped it open, revealing identification cards and documents embossed with the seal of property ownership. She held them up long enough for him to see, then lowered them, her voice steady as a blade. "Perhaps now you understand," she said quietly. "I am not a visitor. I am not trespassing. This estate is mine. And every time you raised your voice at me, every time you doubted me, every time you ordered me to leave, you were speaking to the very person you were hired to protect." Her words struck harder than any reprimand his superiors could ever deliver. Daniel's knees nearly buckled under the weight of humiliation. He opened his mouth, but no words came, only a faint stammer that dissolved into silence. The neighbors, once bold in their gossip, now withdrew into their homes, embarrassed for him, chastened by her calm dominance. One by one, curtains slid shut. Porch lights flicked off. The street, moments ago alive with whispers, returned to a hush. The woman turned, her heels clicking with steady rhythm against the driveway stone as she walked past him. Each step was a reminder of her composure, her authority, her quiet power. When she reached the sedan, she paused, not to leave, but to retrieve something from the passenger seat. She emerged with a slim briefcase. With a flick of her wrist, she closed the car door and turned back toward him. "You see, Daniel," she said, using his name for the first time, which startled him even further. "I worked too long and too hard to be questioned about where I belong. Every stone in this driveway, every brick in that mansion, every light on this property. Primera paid for Italiano, with my sweat, my sacrifices, and my determination. So when you tell me I do not belong here, you are not just wrong, you're blind." Her words cut through him, not cruelly, but with undeniable truth. For the first time in his career, Daniel realized that his assumptions had not just been unprofessional. They had been deeply personal, born from a prejudice he had never acknowledged until now. He bowed his head, shame flooding his face. I did not know," he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of regret. The woman studied him for a moment, her gaze softening ever so slightly. "That is the problem," she said. "Too often, people think they know. They think they can tell who belongs and who does not, just by looking. But they do not see the battles fought, the roads traveled, the struggles overcome. They do not see the truth." With that, she turned and began walking up the driveway toward the grand mansion. The gates behind her closed with a low hum, sealing off the world outside. Daniel stood rooted to the spot, watching her figure grow smaller against the sprawling estate. In that moment, he realized the confrontation had never been about the driveway. It had been about dignity, respect, and the peril of assumptions. And while he had lost his authority in front of the neighborhood, he had gained something far more valuable, a painful, humbling lesson that would stay with him long after his shift ended. The revelation was not just hers. It was ease. Long before she owned the sprawling estate and commanded respect without raising her voice, she had been just another woman navigating a world that rarely recognized her worth. Her life had begun humbly in a modest apartment in the city's older district, where the streets were narrow, the buildings crowded, and opportunity was scarce. Every morning, she woke to the sound of traffic and the distant rumble of construction, her small apartment filled with the faint scent of coffee and determination. She had dreams bigger than her circumstances' dreams, that seemed almost reckless to anyone else. She wanted financial independence, a home of her own, and the ability to live life on her terms. But in a world quick to judge by appearances, she had to fight for every inch. Early in her career, she took on jobs that most people would overlook. She drove taxis and SUVs, transported executives and strangers, sometimes for 12-hour shifts with little pay. Rain, snow, or blistering sun did not deter her. Every long night behind the wheel, every customer who underestimated her intelligence, every smirk of doubt she faced hardened her resolve. She learned to move with precision, to observe, and to quietly assert control, even when the world tried to dismiss her. Her struggles were not only financial but social. Many doors closed before she even had a chance to enter. Investors laughed at her ideas, landlords doubted her reliability, and colleagues assumed she was inexperienced. Yet, she persisted. She studied relentlessly finance, property management, negotiation, and found mentors who recognized her potential. Slowly, she began to accumulate small wins. A contract here, a small property there, a reputation for integrity and strategic brilliance. But the climb was neither swift nor easy. She faced betrayal from business partners who tried to take advantage of her modest background. She endured ridicule from those who assumed her youth and appearance made her incapable. There were nights she cried alone in her apartment, exhausted and doubting herself, wondering if the sacrifices were worth it. Yet each challenge became fuel. Every closed door, every whispered doubt, every skeptical glance from strangers became a step on the staircase she was building toward her dreams. Through sheer determination, she gradually acquired properties, making shrewd investments while building a network of support. Each property was a milestone, a modest apartment, then a small townhouse, followed by increasingly larger estates. With every purchase, she refined her skills, learned the nuances of negotiation, and developed the unshakable confidence that would eventually define her presence. In the elite world, she once could only observe from afar. Her crowning achievement, the mansion on the private driveway, was not just a purchase, it was the culmination of years of tireless work, sacrifices, and silent victories. She had not inherited it, nor had it been gifted to her. It was earned, bought with her intellect, strategy, and relentless pursuit of independence. Every brick in the mansion was a testament to her endurance. Every light in the driveway reflected countless nights of effort, calculated risks, an unwavering focus. This journey had also taught her patience, humility, and the quiet power of self-reliance. She knew how quickly appearances could mislead. She had lived it, and that knowledge shaped how she carried herself in the confrontation with Daniel. She did not need to shout, argue, or justify her right, because her entire life had been preparation for exactly this moment. the moment when her hard-won truth could finally speak for itself. By the time she stepped out of her car on that fateful evening, she was no longer the woman who had started with nothing. She was the culmination of years of perseverance, the embodiment of resilience, and a living example of what it meant to rise above doubt, judgment, and the casual assumptions of the world. Every step she took up that driveway carried the weight of her story. Daniel was only beginning to understand. The mansion's gates closed behind her with a soft metallic hum, sealing the world outside. Daniel remained frozen on the driveway, the weight of embarrassment and awe pressing down on him. He had been confident, assertive, even proud until he realized that every assumption he had made about her was wrong. Every judgment, every dismissive thought, every harsh word now felt like a personal failure. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sounds were the distant evening breeze rustling the leaves and the faint click of the woman's heels as she moved toward the mansion. Then Daniel found his voice, low and hesitant. I'm sorry," he said. His words were clumsy, but sincere. "I didn't know. I judged you unfairly." The woman turned to him, her eyes steady, assessing. There was no anger, no mockery, only a quiet authority that both humbled and inspired him. "Daniel," she said softly, "apologies are not enough if they come only from fear of being wrong. But I accept them because I believe people can learn. You judged based on appearances and assumptions. Most people would have walked away, never realizing the truth. But you are still here. That matters." He swallowed hard, ashamed but grateful. I will do better. I see that." "No." Her gaze softened slightly, a rare hint of warmth breaking through her formidable composure. "Good. That is all I ask. Respect is not given lightly, Daniel. It is earned, understood, and lived. Today, you have learned the lesson few ever do." As she walked toward the grand mansion, Daniel watched her, not as a security guard confronting a stranger, but as a witness to a story of determination, courage, and triumph. Every step she took reflected years of struggle, perseverance, and unshakable confidence, the very essence of the woman he had misjudged. The neighbors, who had been watching from behind curtains and open windows, now returned to their homes quietly, leaving the street in a hushed reflection. The drama had passed, but its lesson lingered. Pride, prejudice, and assumptions could crumble instantly when faced with truth. For Daniel, this was more than an embarrassment, it was a turning point. He realized that his role as a security guard was not just about enforcing rules, it was about recognizing people as dignity, understanding their stories, and acting with humility. He had learned firsthand the cost of judgment and the power of patience and observation. The woman, meanwhile, returned to her mansion, closing the door behind her with the calm satisfaction of someone who had earned every inch of her world. Her victory was not in proving Daniel wrong, it was in demonstrating what perseverance and integrity could achieve. She had faced the quiet struggles of life, and tonight, her truth had spoken louder than assumptions, biases, or appearances. In the days that followed, Daniel's experience became a personal lesson he carried into every interaction. He treated visitors and residents alike with a newfound respect. understanding that one could never judge a book by its cover. And for the woman, life continued as it always had: successful, composed, and dignified Butna, with a quiet story added to her legacy. The evening, Agar, confident in his assumptions, had learned the hard way the lesson of humility. The confrontation on the driveway had ended, but the moral of the encounter endured. Appearances can deceive, assumptions can fail, and the quiet strength of a determined individual can challenge and transform the perceptions of those who underestimate them.